Pioneer brand canola with Optimum Gly, the highest yielding glyphosate tolerant trait on the market. What's next in canola happens here.
I'm Sean Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now.
Hello and welcome to RealAg on the Weekend here on CJME 980 and CKOM 650. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. Your regular host, Sean Haney, is away this week, but I am so glad to join you here. We've got a great show lined up for you. Right after this open, we're going to hear from Kristin Thompson. She's with the Beef Research Council. She's got some great tips on feed testing, the how, the why, and what to do with that information. Then we've got a product spotlight with Nutrien eKonomics. Plus, you'll hear from Shari Laventure. She's with SaskAg Matters, and we'll round out the show with Wasko and the beef market update. But now let's hop to my discussion with Kristin Thompson all about feed testing, that super important forage. Welcome here, Kristin.
Thanks for having me.
So it is, 'tis the season, whether we want it to be or not, where many of us are staring down the barrel of maybe some cooler weather, starting that winter feed schedule. And that, of course, brings us back to the importance of feed testing. So maybe let's start there. Why is it so important to have a plan for feed testing for your herd?
Great way to start. Whether you are a cow-calf producer, have background in cattle, own a feedlot, understanding the nutritional qualities of the forage that you're feeding is paramount to maintaining animal health, welfare, and productivity. So feed testing, it not only allows you to develop appropriate rations that are going to meet the needs of your livestock based on their stage of production or class, it's also going to help you identify any nutritional gaps that may require further supplementation, such as nutritional deficiencies. It can help to prevent or identify any potential problems due to mycotoxins, nitrates, that kind of thing. It allows producers to economize feed use and make use of alternative feeds safely, as well as accurately price feed for buying and selling so that you can price that feed on a dollars per nutrient basis.
So really, I mean, hitting the big ones there, but thank you for bringing up, because I forgot about that one too. Certainly looking at really trying to head off any disasters as far as mycotoxin loads or, as you mentioned, nitrates, those sorts of things. And then, of course, it does bring up that question of supplementing with energy or protein, whichever one may be lacking, knowing ahead of time. In my mind, I always think about with livestock, it's cheaper to keep them in good condition than it is to try and catch up on nutrition.
You are very correct on that. It takes a lot more energy, protein, a lot more feed, a lot more cost in order to bring that body condition score back up for those cows, for sure.
Okay. Now, it does bring up the question, we've got, round bales, wrapped hay, we've got square bales, we've got maybe bags of silage. What's our approach, or what should be our approach for each of those? Maybe I'll start with, when we're talking about round bales, the direction at which I take a sample matters. So walk us through round bales first, and then I've got a couple questions about silage as well.
To start off on sampling, I just want to kind of highlight the first step before you're even taking that sample. The first step that you want to take is to separate those forages into lots. Based on, could be based on a number of factors, but the reason to do that is to allow for the most accurate estimate of the nutrient content of that forage. So these lots could be based on forage maturity, they could be based on variety, harvest date, they could be a single cutting or a single field, but the idea is to separate them based on the expected forage quality differences. So just as a quick example, if you've got an alfalfa stand and you get a first and second cut, keep those two cuts separate, sample them separately, test them separately so that you know what you're dealing with, because there will be some quality differences between a first and second cut. So moving on to sampling. A forage or a feed test is only as good as the sample that you submitted for testing. Very important to remember. And so you need to be sampling at the right time, using the right tools and techniques, and collecting the right number of samples. When it comes to dry baled forage, a forage probe is recommended rather than taking hand grab samples, because hand grab samples are more likely to contain a disproportionate levels of leaf to stem, right? You want to get a good leaf to stem ratio. On those, the forage probes should be 12 to 18 inches in length, about 3/8 to 3/4 inches in diameter. And they can be designed as a hand crank, so you're using your own power to drive that probe into the bale. It can be a lot of work, or they can be attached to a cordless drill, which makes it a lot easier. So when you're using that forage probe, you want to insert it into the end of a square bale, whether it's a large square bale or a small square bale. You want to insert it between the twines and insert that probe all the way into that bale. Pull it out, dump that core into usually a 1-quart zip bag, kind of heavy duty one you want to use so you don't get any puncturing of the plastic, and then seal that up for testing. When it comes to a round bale, you want to sample from the curved side of the bale. So, and the reason that we're sampling from the end of a square bale and the curved side of a round bale is that you're going through those layers of forage so that you're getting the best leaf to stem ratio to be most representative of what that forage is going to be like.
My question then becomes, I've got some wrapped feed. I know certainly many farmers that would have a bunk or a bag of silage. I would imagine that those are ones that I want to test when I open them. That, of course, makes me a little bit worried about turnaround time. So what's a good strategy for opening up something that's been ensiled and testing and getting those results back in a timely fashion?
When it comes to silage that's in a bunk or a pit or a bag, you can actually sample those as they're being harvested and before they're covered and sealed and ensiled. The benefit of sampling at harvest is that it gives you an advanced knowledge of the quality of that forage going into the pit, which can give producers time to inventory and plan for feed purchasing based on that forage quality. So if you've got forage going in that's really low in protein, lower than you expected, you've got time to plan and purchase. If the silage has been packed and sealed properly and normal fermentation has occurred, you shouldn't be seeing a significant change in the nutrient profile, particularly when you're looking at the fiber and protein fractions. That being said, when you open up that pit or that bag, you want to do another sample just to verify that the fermentation has taken place appropriately and there's no significant changes in that nutritional quality, and then make adjustments appropriately. When you are sampling, you want to allow yourself a minimum of 2 weeks between when you take the sample and when you should expect the results to come back from the lab. Give yourself maybe 3 weeks just to be on the safe side, because you want to make sure that you've got that result back before you've got to feed that out. But just as a note on that with silage, another good thing about having the sample results from harvest is that when you open up a new bag of silage, the first portion of that silage is not going to be representative of what else is in the bag. So you actually want to feed out a small portion first and then take a sample so that it's more representative of what you're feeding for the next, 2 to 3 months out of that bag.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes sense, right? You would likely have, if you're going to have pockets of spoilage, et cetera, those sorts of things likely going to happen sort of right at that front. So work your way in a little bit and get a better sense of what it actually is. Okay, so that's really good to know sort of, or it's a good tip of looking ahead to where you may be able to head off an issue before that bag even gets opened. This all, though, does come down to, even if I've got a 2-week turnaround, let's say I have been very vigilant and got my feed tests and I have them in hand. What do I do with them, or who can help me with them? Because I will say I'm getting better at reading feed tests, but I think a lot of people, we look at them and we sort of have a couple numbers that we're dealing with, but who can help me actually go through what I get back on those results to actually start to put together a balanced ration or to meet the goals that I have for the livestock I'm feeding?
Good question. And it can be confusing. And when you look at all those numbers on a feed test, which ones do I focus on? Do I use dry matter? Do I use as fed? It's a lot to take in. My recommendation would be for producers to reach out to their local extension specialists or nutritionists if they do have questions. These experts are a really great resource on reading the feed test, providing pointers on how to use that feed, and also balancing rations. I'm based in Saskatchewan. So in Saskatchewan, we have our Saskatchewan Ministry of Agriculture has regional offices located around the province, and they're a really good resource for these types of questions. There's also ration balancing software programs such as Cowbites, which is available through the BCRC at beefresearch.ca/cowbites. And it's a really user-friendly, easy-to-use tool for producers to balance their own rations, so they can take their water tests, their feed tests, and put those numbers in, and then choose their class of cattle, stage of production, environmental conditions, etc., and balance a ration that will appropriately use that feed based on the feed test.
Okay. Now, so good advice there certainly is, reaching out to local extension or your specialists or perhaps a nutritionist as well. And you mentioned water. So I know we're talking about, forage and feed testing here, but how critical is it to also test a water source when considering putting together a ration?
It is very critical, especially if you are dealing with poor quality water. Like if you're in an area or a region that's got historically poor quality water, testing that can be very critical, and it will have a significant impact on the nutrients that are available within that ration for the cattle. Because if you've got high sulfates in your water, that's going to bind up copper in your ration. So you might need to supplement extra copper, have a more bioavailable type of copper that's in your ration.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and I'll be back with more of RealAg on the Weekend right after this.
Experience the most efficient system for delivering sulfur and phosphate to meet your crop's needs with Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST. Since 2010, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has been helping farmers to grow great wheat. Covering everything from markets, the latest research, pest and disease control, all the way down to on-farm trials, the Wheat School has everything your crop needs. Check out our massive video library on YouTube and grow great wheat with the Wheat School, brought to you by Syngenta Canada, C&M Seeds, and Alberta Grains.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Welcome back to RealAg on the Weekend for this September 14th. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith, and the following is a paid product spotlight by Nutrien eKonomics. You'll hear now from Sean Haney and Karl Wyant with Nutrien eKonomics.
Hey, Karl, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you again. So, okay, now we're into harvest, and we got to start to think ahead to next year already. So as farmers wrap up harvest this year in 24, what should they be thinking about to prepare for that 25 season?
One thing to think about is checking the bank account. And I don't just mean the financial bank account, really looking at what's in the soil, at the end of your harvest, especially if your crop overperformed or underperformed your yield expectations this year. Taking that soil test and checking the soil checking account can really give you some key insights on what nutrients you need to invest in next year and help you optimize those fertilizer dollars that will be coming from that real bank account.
Yeah, and I don't know about your bank account, but mine depletes, and you need to make sure you're refreshing it. So harvest removes a lot of nutrients from the soil. When should farmers be soil testing to get that accurate look at the nutrients they're going to need to add back to the soil to refresh that bank account, so to speak?
That's right. When we are taking a crop off the field, we are removing nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, and sulfur with it. For example, a 40 bushel an acre canola crop will take off between 80 and 100 units of nitrogen. That's pounds per acre. 30 pounds of phosphate, 20 pounds of potassium, and around 15 to 20 pounds of sulfur. So, you add these up over the years, and that can stack up pretty quick to some, depleting checking accounts like you mentioned. And so the piece that's so important is really to align your, real-time yield expectations and the results you have from the combine and the yield monitor and say, okay, on this field, on average, I took this much off. And you can use these crop nutrient removal calculators. We have one available at Nutrien-eKonomics.com. That's available for free. You can type your yield in and actually get yourself a fairly good estimate on what you took off. So you can make that plan coming into 2025 of what nutrients you need to put back and what you need to prioritize on your spend to maintain soil fertility.
Yeah, and what's the science of doing that test as close to the freeze up as possible?
That's right. There's some economics and some labor involved there. If you wait too long, your soil's going to freeze and it's like pounding concrete, which I wouldn't wish that on anybody. It's not very fun. So if you can do your harvest, make sure all your harvest is in order and everyone's home and happy, then just go out and grab those soil samples before the frost comes in. And that gives you some advantages, that fall soil sampling, because you have an open field. You're under way less pressure in the field to go do stuff relative to the spring because you've got winter ahead of you. And so that could be a nice advantage because you've got some time on your hands and time to plan, time to react to what that soil sample's saying. One challenge is that with those nutrients, especially the ones that move, like nitrogen, sometimes potassium could move on you, given how much, if you have a lot of snow melt or rainfall during the wintertime. So that could be a challenge, but really, I think with time on your side, you can plan. And then if you have a really challenging winter precipitation-wise, you can always go back and kind of top up and look at your nitrogen and potassium levels more immediate to when the crop's going to go in.
So I know it's only fall, but why do farmers need to plan ahead? Think about their spring starter fertilizers at this time of the year. Why is that?
So the phosphate, which is what typically a starter fertilizer has in it, the highest analysis, so typically high analysis phosphate fertilizers. The phosphate's not going to move a whole lot on you from fall to spring. So getting a fall soil sample and seeing, hey, do my soils need phosphate? That's the number one reason to justify the use of a starter fertilizer. You can get that information now. So then you can use those winter months to start saying, well, what is the best starter fertilizer for me? Is it just a formulation with phosphate in it? Or is my soil sample telling me I need other things? I need a little bit of potassium. I maybe need a micronutrient package. So you can go to your ag retailer and match the need for the starter fertilizer with a specific formulation that best matches your soil sample.
And is the benefit of the starter fertilizer just to get that launch out of the ground?
Yeah, if you think about growing a crop, especially in a place with a short growing season, you're trying to run that horse right out of the gate as quickly as you can. And so if you provide that starter fertilizer, near the seed, and you can get that crop the nutrients it needs right out of the gate and get it up, get that seed emerged, and get your plant growing as quickly as possible.
Sort of like an athlete taking pre-workout. You want to get off to a quick start.
Yeah, the Olympics just happened. Probably a lot of pre-workout going around there in Paris. Maybe just really fancy coffee. But yeah, you want to get out of that gate so you can start running your race and have a good result at the end of the season.
Makes sense. Hey, Karl, thanks so much for joining us here today on RealAg Radio for this eKonomics Product Spotlight.
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, we will be back here on CJME 980 Regina and CKOM 650 Saskatoon with RealAg on the weekend right after this.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomics Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Protect your anhydrous ammonia and bottom line even if temperatures hit 15 degrees or below. That's not too late to apply agronomically effective, non-corrosive Centuro nitrogen stabilizer. Learn more at centuro.ca.
Hey, welcome back to CJME 980 and CKOM 650. This is RealAg on the Weekend. I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. Thank you so much for joining and for listening along. Joining me now, I have Shari Laventure. She's with SaskAg Matters, and she's going to highlight what SaskAg Matters is and how farmers and their families can access mental health supports in the province. So let's start there. Who or what is SaskAg Matters?
So SaskAg Matters was born out of research done at Sask Polytech by Dr. Michelle Pavlov and myself. There was a group of us that did research to say, what are Saskatchewan farmers getting for supports and help with their mental health? Is it working? Is it timely? Is it what is working and what isn't, essentially? And after we did the research, we learned a lot of things that, we said we need to fill a hole here. There's a gap. So we launched the SaskAg Matters Mental Health Network. You can see us saskagmatters.ca. You can go there to see all that we have done. We are solely running on private donations. So the good, wonderful people of this province give us money. 100% of the funds go to farmer, rancher, egg producer mental health supports.
Okay. And so, you did identify these gaps. What were some of those? What are some of the resources that farmers will find if they head to saskagmatters.ca?
Right. So on there, we have trained mental health therapists who are also ag knowledgeable. And that was what we found, is that when farmers are very stoic, we know that. And when they did finally put their hand up and say, I think I need some help, they were running into roadblocks, like it was too far to travel to get there. And also that the help they were getting, the people didn't understand their business. So on our webpage, you will see that we have therapists who are trained and certified, but they're from either from an ag background or have a lot of ag knowledge. So they understand ag producers.
Mm-hmm. And that is something that, of course, we've come across in a few different ways when we start talking about, supporting farmers, and that it is so important to have someone who understands sort of the context of what they're talking about. Yeah. What did you find in your research as far as how meaningful that was?
Well, that was the loudest voice out of, we surveyed, it was during COVID when we were doing the research. So we were hoping to be in the buddy seat in the tractor with producers. And unfortunately, they had to all be virtual over the phone interviews. But that was loud and clear from them. they need to talk to somebody who understands ag, and they also need to have supports that aren't 3 and 4 hours away from where they are. So there's lots of supports in the big centers in Saskatchewan, but most ag producers don't live in the big centers in Saskatchewan. So that was a barrier as well. The travel time, they would need to take usually an entire day away from the farm just to go get, a 1 or 2 hour session with the therapist.
Mm-hmm. So you did mention that this is privately funded. You do have some supporters, though, as well. So who are the supporters of this this initiative, and how can people find out more about SaskAg Matters?
Yeah, so I work for Cargill, and Cargill's been a big supporter. They've kept the wheels on the bus. This is going into our second year, so we're new, right? But they've been a big supporter. We had a young gentleman down south give us a heifer that they then auctioned off. And I can't remember the dollar value, but it was a big dollar value that they raised on this heifer. There's been other funding events happen, like dinners, and we've just had a really good uptake of people saying, yes, we know that this is a need in Saskatchewan, and that SaskAg Matters is filling that need. So we've had lots of great supporters.
Wonderful. Okay. And so
we're listed on our website.
Okay. Yes. So we'll tell everybody to head there. For someone who hears this and thinks, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot. It might be something that might work for me. What would be your encouragement to them to take the step to actually reach out and perhaps, explore what's on the site and see what's available? What would be your encouragement to them?
So on the website, they will see actual photos and bios of our trained therapists, and they'll get to choose who they want to work with and how they want that therapy session to happen, whether that's via phone or a Zoom meeting or in person. There's many different ways that the producer can reach out and have the session with a therapist. We've recently added 5 new ones. I'm not sure they're uploaded on the web page yet. I'm hoping by next Monday or next week sometime we'll have them up. There are 3 currently on there. But the producer goes to the web page, reads the bios, and picks his own therapist. When he phones or gets in contact, whether it's email, phone, whatever, the therapist, he just says, I found you on SaskAg Matters, and that session is covered by SaskAg Matters. So the farmer doesn't have to pay for that session. Okay. So each egg producer or egg producer's family member is eligible for 6 hours of free counseling through SaskAg Matters.
Wonderful. All right, Shari, thank you so much for this information. We'll send everybody your way and really encourage everybody to go check it out. So thank you so much for joining me on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Lyndsey.
All right, it's time to take a quick break here on RealAg on the weekend on CJME 980 Regina and CKOM 650 Saskatoon. I'll be back with our final segment of the show right after this. I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Pioneer brand canola with Optimum Gly, the highest yielding glyphosate tolerant trait on the market. What's next in canola happens here.
Welcome back to Real Ag on the Weekend here on CJME 980 Regina and CKOM 650 Saskatoon. I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. It is wonderful to be speaking to you today. If you've got any feedback on today's show, highly recommend zip me an email. lsmith@realagriculture.com. Would love to hear from you. If you've got any story ideas, feedback on today's show, all those sorts of things, you let us know. We'll try and get back to you, or you may hear your particular topic on an upcoming episode of Real Ag on the Weekend. All right. Well, if you've got cattle, you probably have been watching those cattle markets very closely. We are, of course, headed into the fall run, and that does typically mean that seasonally prices do pull back a little, but for the past few years anyway, we've sort of gone against what seasonal averages have told us. It has been not bad times. I'm saying not bad. I'm not saying great, but not bad times for the fall run in the past few years. So to break it all down, we've got Ann Wasko with the beef market update joining us from BC this week to talk all about those cattle markets, both south and here at home.
Here we are. Thank you. Good to see you too.
Yeah, this is exciting. Okay, So as per usual, with the beef market update, we typically start in the south, work our way north. How did the cattle markets fare this week?
Okay, well, in the U.S., especially the southern trade, Texas and Kansas, they did kind of catch this week, and they traded steady at 181. So that was good to see. Kind of it just wasn't another week of down. The north, actually, the dress trade in Nebraska a little bit stronger than last week. 291 to 292 delivered. That's kind of 4 to 5 higher than they really struggled last week. I think it was more a timing thing. So that was good to see. The cutout, $4.50 lower than last week. The choice is at 307 last night. And the select is about $11 back. Now, again, Sean and I have talked about that. Seasonality says that once we get into this time of year, September, October, that's really a struggle for these wholesale prices and demand. And I think that's exactly it. So until we kind of get till the middle of mid-October, that's kind of the storyline. So not a surprise to see the cutout losing a bit of ground there. Now, bringing it back home to Western Canada, we saw Alberta fat cattle prices 405 to 406 delivered dress. That's steady to 5 lower, kind of traded at the low end of last week's range. And so that means when Canfax does their weekly average this week, it's probably going to be in that 243, 244 area. So certainly it's come off the highs of the summer. But it, again, from a seasonal perspective, pretty much on track.
Okay. Now, we do have some trade numbers for July.
Still the data is, and we talked about this with the June data, still a little bit impacted from the strike. And so production numbers were still low in July, and before you get things ramped up, especially in terms of trade, it showed up in the data. So for the month of July, we saw beef exports down 7%. And just again to reiterate on that point, June and July were two of the smallest months we've seen in years. So it really had an impact, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. So for the year, so if we count up year to date, 7 months in 24, we're still sitting up 3% in volume and 1% in value. So I think, we talk about how important trade is to the beef demand story, and it really still is a good story, even though we've kind of stubbed our toe, if you will, for both June and July, but for understandable reasons. Just to break down some of the key countries that we export to, we were down 14% to the U.S. in July, but year to date, we're still up 3%. Japan, we actually gained a point. We're up 1% in July, so that was good news. And we're up 6% year to date. So again, good solid news into our strongest Asian country. Mexico, we're up 7% in July, but down 5% year to date. That's got a lot to do with the peso, though, in terms of why are we down. And South Korea, we're up 1% year to date. So those 4 countries are our main, take the bulk of Canada's beef exports.
Okay. And good point there of just the story that it does tell on being able to move product, of how incredibly important it is that we are capable of moving product. Now we do have, and this is fun, and somewhat confusing, so we'll clarify it. We do have some August import numbers. So
Yes.
we're sort of off by a month in imports and exports, but that's okay. We'll cover it, and eventually it all catches up.
Yeah. Two different departments, so two different timings. So August beef imports, and we've talked about how much smaller our Canadian cow kill is here in 24. So we're down 16%,
Wow.
1/6, in 2024 compared to last year. So, and that's been a common trait even in the U.S. We see the cow kill off substantially as well. So when our cow kill is down, guess what we're short of? We're short of that lean trim beef that we call it. So that's where the bulk of our increases of our imports are coming from. So overall, our imports in August were up 2%, but year to date, we're sitting up 13%. To the U.S., from the U.S., we're down 6% and down 5% year to date. The storyline is Australia and New Zealand, of course. From Australia, year to date, we're up 125%. From New Zealand, we're up 53%. So again, pretty clear what's going on. We're short of cow beef. It's coming from the two largest countries that we would typically import lean trim from.
So now that to me suggests that demand is still strong, that is quite inelastic. Is that the case?
It is. Canadians tend to eat a pretty static amount of ground beef or ground beef type products. And so when we're short of it with domestic, we import it. And historically, that's been exactly what goes on, and that's what's happening today.
Mm-hmm. I certainly saw, I would say, I saw some social media shares of seeing, where did this beef come from? Australia. So, people notice, certainly, especially if you're a producer, you notice these things. But we love our burgers. We're going to have our burgers, no matter where it comes from.
And talking about, I don't have retail prices to talk about, but anecdotally, doing some traveling this week and did see some great sale prices on ground beef. I'm out in British Columbia right now, so there are still some very good deals on ground beef out there if you're looking for one.
Okay, I always am. We are also a family that eats a lot of beef, and we'll continue to, regardless. Okay, so now you did mention a few of the sort of that word seasonal coming in. This isn't a stellar time seasonally for prices, but we have bucked this trend some years. So is this year sort of playing out more on trend than we've seen in the last few years?
Yeah, interesting to talk about seasonality, because that's kind of the question of the day as we head into the fall run, especially. And I think, looking back on the last few years, we really, as you say, your words, kind of bucked the trend and kind of traded a lot more flat, especially through the fourth quarter. And I think my explanation is going to be, and it's my story, so I can tell my story. But I think over the last few years, we've been moving to this newer, higher price trend. And so when you're moving from, historically a price area we've traded at for a number of years, and now we've moved to a new price area, you kind of don't see the seasonality so much while you're making that move higher or lower, in this case, higher. But now we're here. I think this is kind of where we're going to trade for a bit in terms of big price range. But so that means the seasonality is likely going to return. So I would expect to see lower slaughter cow prices as we head into the fall run. They typically make their low in November. If you're going to bet some money, that's where I'd put it. Same with calf prices, although we're still trading well over a year ago prices on cull cows, and calf prices are coming closer to last year's levels, but we're still above. But I do think we're going to see them, continue to work lower just because of that strong seasonal trend on really all of our classes of cattle. For those reasons, this is when the bulk of the run happens.
That's right. Yeah. And it didn't start nearly as early either as we saw in the past few years, right? More on trend.
Huge drought impact the last couple of years, so it really stretched your run out. This year, it's been super quiet. Where I live in southwest Saskatchewan, a phenomenal grass year. Everything's going to, stay at grass as long as possible, and so it puts your run into your more typical fall pattern. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Okay. The next time we talk, Anne, I'm going to ask you where we're going to find more cull cows if we're down that far. But we've got time. Study up on that one.
Okay.
Let me know where we're going to find them. All right. Okay. And we'll next time we talk, we'll talk about that one. All right. Anne Wasko, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me here for the Beef Market Update.
Thanks. See you.
Well, that does it for another episode of Real Ag on the Weekend. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Anne Wasko, to Shari Laventure, to Karl Wyant, and to Kristin Thompson for joining me on the show today. If you've got any feedback, give us a call, 1-855-776-6147. You can leave a message there, or highly recommend head on over to RealAgriculture.com. We have all of our coverage, written pieces, audio, video, it's all there. And I highly recommend follow us on YouTube as well. Have a wonderful week. Safe harvest, everyone. We'll talk to you again.